Sir, do you have juniors in your office?
Yes, of course.
There is a huge buzzing debate about how juniors should be treated. Is there a prototype? Is there a benchmark that exists?
I'm glad you're asking me this question because I think the way juniors are treated across, whether it is a senior advocates chamber, whether it is simply a litigation counsel chamber, or whether it is a corporate law firm, big, small, does not matter. I think the tendency to treat our juniors better must be a tendency that we all should inculcate. I think if you can consider what a junior would need, and I was a junior at one point of time in my life, and therefore I can only go back to that time and in my mind map what a junior expects. I think a couple of things are very important. First, a junior must be treated with dignity. I think any place of work must treat the junior who joins the chamber or the law firm as a professional and not just as a person who's supporting or playing a supporting role. Therefore, treating the junior with dignity, treating him or her as a fellow professional is, I think, most important. Second, pay parity. India, I think, is one of the worst jurisdictions when it comes to paying junior advocates. If you look at the country's economy is whatever, $4 trillion in nominal value, $14 trillion in purchasing power parity. Every other vertical in the industry today pays well, but comparatively, although law is one of the most highly paid verticals within the larger economic spectrum in this country, I think law pays very, very badly on an average when it comes to juniors. Of course, there are exceptions. There are exceptions in terms of senior chambers. There are exceptions in terms of sole litigation practitioners who pay juniors better. There are exceptions in terms of some large law firms paying juniors very well. But those are exceptions. A vast majority of juniors in this country do not get paid well. And when it is well, I mean at least a basic payment to ensure that it is in tune with the times. It is sufficient for the junior to live a comfortable life with reasonable comforts and not really be existential. Third, mentorship. I think mentorship is extremely important because if a junior should grow as a lawyer, grow at the bar, and continue to actually contribute to the legal ecosystem, mentorship is important. Whilst in mentorship, India has done well. I think seniors do mentor their juniors very well. Unfortunately, mentorship comes at a cost. Because you're mentoring a junior, the tendency is that you don't need to pay the junior. I think mentorship cannot come at a cost. Mentorship and paying the junior well are two independent things and they have to be on an even keel. Fourth, I think from a scenario of juniors joining chambers or joining law firms, an equal opportunity workplace must be developed. There seems to be in many parts of the country, Delhi it may not be, but in many other parts of the country and more so in smaller towns, the unwritten rule seems to be that a female finds it more difficult to find a place in a senior chamber than a male member. For whatever reason, a female is not really welcomed into a chamber, maybe because it is excruciatingly long working hours, no discipline in terms of whether you have weekends, whether you have time off, safety, environment. Sometimes, unfortunately, the comfort of playing a boys' club. Therefore, women really find it harder. And therefore, an equal opportunity workspace has to be set up. And I think it's upon every senior to ensure that they intrusively develop that equal opportunity workspace, not just let factors be. Lastly, I think the scenario of how a junior deserves to be treated is actually to give work-life balance. And I don't mean it simply as words. When I mean work-life balance, I genuinely mean it. I think we have unfortunately developed this great theory to say the harder you work, the better you are. There is an unnecessary premium that is set on hard work in terms of time frame. You don't need to work 7 days a week. You don't need to work 18 hours a day to actually be a successful and a good lawyer. You need to time yourself well. You need to be disciplined in terms of the amount of time you spend at work so that you should not frown upon somebody who's efficient at work and therefore gets out of the chamber, let's say at 7 o'clock or 7:30 or even earlier. Why should it be even 7:30? Or somebody who's efficient who turns up and says, I'll be productive. My work is done by the weekend. So at the least, let me have a 6-day week. It's typical sometimes and synonymous of people having 7-day weeks as juniors. You need to have a 5-day week. If you can't have a 5-day week, given the rigors of our profession, at least a 6-day week. So work-life balance is very, very important. Now, the cumulative aspects of all of this, not paying your junior well, not giving your junior work-life balance, not making the atmosphere conducive, not actually showing mentorship but not giving you money, keeping the balance of mentorship and earning and ensuring that they are given a professional status as professional colleagues. All of this or lack of this cumulatively leads to one thing. It talks on the mental health of the junior. That's one problem that we have unfortunately closed our eyes to in the legal profession, given the rigors, given how much work is extracted out of a junior. The net result is that mental health has become a huge problem, at least within the practicing lawyer community. And when I mean practicing lawyer, I mean the litigating lawyer community. It is important for us to actually apply our thought to it, make sure that our juniors get the requisite amount of support, requisite amount of care, requisite amount of counseling, so that they are actually in a frame of mind that they can bloom to their full potential.
So there's a lot of discussion, and this is something that props up in conversation with a lot of what you call the first generation lawyers, that it requires a certain degree of privilege to break into this profession. Also primarily because of a lot of reasons that you just stated of, there's no pay parity, how much you're paid, the kind of conditions that exist. Is privilege really something that you require to break into this profession?
Unfortunately, privilege has been pandered because the other factors of what I spoke are not being followed. If you follow a professional setup, if you deal with your junior as a fellow professional, although younger, if you make sure that your junior is paid well, if you make sure that your junior has a requisite work-life balance and that there is an atmosphere in which he can thrive or she can thrive, then privilege is not necessary. Then you deal with the person for the person's worth. You don't deal with the person because of the person's pedigree. And privilege today, unfortunately, has become a lever which actually puts you on a springboard, essentially because we do not have the other professional parameters. And I personally refuse to believe that privilege is what takes you places in this profession. I am effectively a first generation lawyer, but actually not. My father is a practicing lawyer, so that way second generation. But I've never worked with my father, never worked in the same town or city that he has worked in. We've both had our separate paths. And I've had, of course, a tough initial years, but a very fruitful career. And I have enormous number of people that I can think of as I speak, and I don't want to name them, who are all first generation lawyers, but who have done fantastically well, who have contributed so much from the bar to the ensuing jurisprudence in this country. Therefore, I think this whole scenario of what it was 30 years ago to saying that unless you come from a particular class, particular economic net worth, particular privilege, you can't break into the system, you can't do well, all of that is vanishing. The one thing that we can do well to actually eradicate that problem fully is to bring in certain professional parameters within the work atmosphere, whether be it a litigating lawyer or a corporate lawyer, a consulting lawyer. It is that professional parameter which will actually bring in the right value systems and at the same time identify the right talent and let the talent bloom.
So two parts to it. You laid out the parameters that should exist or an ecosystem that should operate if we were to do away with the problems that exist. How can that be made into a reality? One question that I see is very often asked to members of the bar like you is that how do we find mentorship? Some people are fortunate to find mentors. You may stumble upon them. They may find you or you may find them. But people who are new into legal sector or who are first generation lawyers, how should they find mentors?
That is a problem, and I must admit that lack of information in public domain is the biggest problem in terms of identifying mentors. To figure out which chamber you need to join is, I think, the most important decision for a lawyer, because that's what actually sets the footprint for a lawyer. His or her professional journey really will be oriented by where they begin. And therefore, the one way to actually make sure that mentorship is identifiable and mentorship is accessible by the broader diaspora of young lawyers is to make sure that there is a institutional mechanism to put the information out there on who is looking for juniors, etc. If not an official institutional setup, at least an unofficial setup where information trickle down occurs. Law firms have managed that very well. The large law firms in this country have a fantastic recruitment process. They go to law universities. It need not be only the national law universities.
Yes,
that's another thing which I totally disagree with. The best lawyers in the country need not necessarily come from the National Law University. Of course, the NLUs have contributed significantly to the bar, but some of the brightest sparks in the bar are non-NLU graduates. And therefore, let's not take that away. Whilst large law firms have cracked that, the outreach into institutions are good, the information trickle down is good. A young lawyer knows which law firm to apply, which area of practice are they good at. Unfortunately, that level of information dissemination does not exist in sole practicing chambers or senior chambers. Secondly, I think you asked me how can we make this change. The change, I think, begins at home. It is high time that senior advocates and leading practitioners of the bar who run successful chambers really crack the whip within and make sure that they build some systems and have some achievable benchmarks that a junior can actually aspire to achieving, rather than just bringing a junior and dumping the junior in the dark and letting the junior figure out how he or she must actually face life. That's really not the way to do it.
So what do you think is the role of bar councils in regulating a better ecosystem for lawyers to work in?
I think one of the most important things for bar councils to do, and particularly the Bar Council of India and of course the various state bar council, to do is to actually at least bring about, if not bring about rules and regulations, if they don't want to be that intrusive and tell a lawyer or a senior lawyer or a senior practitioner what to do, what not to do, at least bring about a white paper. A white paper which will at least begin a debate and bring in some sort of a self-regulatory mechanism where somebody who wants to achieve the thresholds which are indicated in a white paper can actually apply that in his or her chamber and achieve that. Demonstrating the fact that you can achieve those thresholds will automatically trickle down in the bar, and every neighboring chamber would want to imbibe that. Why? Because if you have this institutional mechanism or at least achievable thresholds and transparency, you will attract the best talent. The minute you attract the best talent, automatically that contributes to the efficiency in your chamber. And efficiency is actually the mother of all situations. And consequently, I think can bring about a huge change. The minute they find that a chamber which is following the white paper is more efficient than the others, every other chamber will fall in line.
Thank you so much, sir.